1. Alright, let's dive deeper into this magnificent 1972 Cadillac DeVille. You know, as a true car enthusiast, I get absolutely giddy when I come across gems like this on Craigslist. This isn't just a car, it's a rolling piece of American history, a testament to an era when bigger was better and luxury knew no bounds. Let's talk about that 472 cubic inch V8 engine for a moment. This power plant is a legend in its own right, known for its smooth operation and torque that could move mountains. With 375 horsepower and a whopping 525 lb-ft of torque, this DeVille doesn't just cruise, it glides with authority. The fact that it's paired with an automatic transmission just adds to that effortless, luxurious feel that Cadillac was famous for. Now I've got to geek out about the condition of this beauty. With only 45,000 original miles, this DeVille has barely been broken in. It's like finding a time capsule on wheels. The brown paint, which might sound boring on paper, is actually a perfect representation of the 70s aesthetic. It's rich, it's classy, and it's 100% original. In the classic car world, original paint is like gold dust. It tells you this car has been babied its entire life. Speaking of care, the upgrades on this DeVille are thoughtful and enhance the driving experience without detracting from its originality. The new radial tires will provide a smoother, safer ride than the original bias-ply tires ever could. And that new stainless steel exhaust system? It's not just for show. It'll give this Caddy a deeper, more authoritative rumble while potentially improving performance. I'm particularly excited about the retro-style stereo. It's a brilliant touch that maintains the vintage look of the interior while providing modern conveniences like Bluetooth and aux input. Imagine cruising down the highway, your favorite tunes playing through new speakers, all while surrounded by that unmistakable 70s luxury car ambiance. It's the best of both worlds. Now, $15,000 might raise some eyebrows, but let's put this in perspective. You're not just buying a car, you're investing in a piece of automotive art. These DeVilles are becoming increasingly rare, especially in this condition. Plus, with the seller open to offers, there's potential for negotiation. But here's the real kicker. This DeVille is more than just a showpiece. The seller states it drives great and rides smooth, which means you can actually enjoy this classic on the road. It's not some trailer queen that only sees sunlight at car shows. This is a usable, drivable slice of American luxury that you can enjoy any day of the week. In the world of classic cars, it's rare to find something this original, this well-maintained, and this drivable. Whether you're a dedicated Cadillac enthusiast or just someone who appreciates the finer things in automotive history, this 1972 DeVille is a find that shouldn't be overlooked. It's not just a car, it's a chance to own and preserve a significant piece of automotive heritage. And let's be honest, nothing turns heads quite like a classic Cadillac. 2. We're diving into a real piece of American automotive history. A 1959 Ford Thunderbird that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $12,900. Now I've got to be straight with you folks. This T-Bird is listed in fair condition, so it's not a showroom-ready beauty. But man, does it have potential? This red beauty is a two-door hardtop, packing a 352 cubic inch Police Interceptor V8 under the hood, boasting 300 horsepower through a 4-barrel carb. It's paired with a Cruise-O-Matic 3-speed transmission and a Ford 9-inch rear end with 3.10 gears, a solid drivetrain combo for cruising. With 97,000 miles on the clock, it's got some stories to tell, but that's part of its charm, right? Now, let's talk about the good stuff. This bird's got power brakes, steering, windows, and even a power driver's seat. The chrome and window glass are in good shape, and it's sporting newer radial tires with less than 2,000 kilometers on them. It's got a newer exhaust system, new carpeting and floor mats, and even the dash clock works. How cool is that? Plus, it comes with factory shop manuals and a full body dust cover. But let's be real, this T-Bird needs some TLC. The seller's honest about it needing a good polish or some touch-up paint. The rear windows need adjustment, and it could use a new choke or electric fuel pump. The front seat covers are faded, and it's due for a tune-up. At $12,900, it's not the cheapest '59 T-Bird out there, but it's not outrageous either. This is a project car with good bones and lots of potential. If you're looking for a classic that you can drive and improve over time, this could be your ticket. Just imagine cruising down the highway in this piece of 50s Americana, turning heads and living the dream. It's not perfect, but with some work, it could be a real stunner. And hey, the seller's open to trades, so who knows? This could be your chance to own a true icon of the American road. 3. We're taking a look at a real gem from the mid-60s, a 1965 Plymouth Valiant that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $14,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average Valiant. This baby's got some serious style and upgrades that make it stand out from the crowd. First off, let's talk about those looks. This Valiant is rocking a custom ruby red paint job with a white roof, giving it a classic two-tone appearance that's sure to turn heads. It's a two-door coupe, which adds to its sporty appeal. The seller lists it in good condition, which is promising for a car that's pushing 60 years old. Under the hood, we've got a 273 cubic inch V8 engine. While the horsepower isn't specified, these engines were known for their peppy performance and reliability. It's paired with an automatic transmission, making it a breeze to cruise around town or hit the highway. Now here's where it gets interesting. This Valiant has had some serious work done to it. The majority of the restoration was performed by the previous owner, but the current owner has added some sweet upgrades. We're talking an aftermarket AC system, perfect for those hot summer cruises. An oversized radiator with an electric fan, great for keeping that V8 cool, and a dual master brake cylinder for improved stopping power. They've also overhauled the steering components and front-end suspension, added rear air shocks, and replaced the battery and tires. But let's be honest here. There are a few things to consider. The actual mileage is unknown, with the odometer reading just 6,104 miles. It's likely rolled over at least once, so keep that in mind. Also, while the restoration work sounds extensive, we don't know exactly when it was done or the quality of the work. At $14,000, this Valiant isn't cheap, but it's not outrageous either for a well-maintained classic with some nice upgrades. It could be a great option for someone looking for a turnkey classic that's ready to hit the road. Just imagine cruising down the street in this ruby red beauty, AC blasting, turning heads, and living that classic car dream. Remember, with any classic car purchase, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection. But if everything checks out, this 65 Valiant could be a fantastic addition to any classic car collection or a great starting point for someone looking to get into the classic car scene. It's not just a car, it's a piece of American automotive history. 4. We're looking at a 1965 Ford Thunderbird that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $2,500, and let me tell you, this bird is ready to fly. First off, let's talk about that color. This T-Bird was refinished in 2019 with a stunning lime green paint job paired with a black pebble roof. It's a head-turner for sure. And it's not just pretty on the outside. The interior is decked out in emerald green, creating a cohesive and eye-catching color scheme that screams 60s cool. Now here's where it gets even better. This beauty is packing a 390 cubic inch V8 with a 4-barrel carb, mated to a 3-speed automatic transmission. And get this, both the engine and transmission were rebuilt in 2008, so you're getting that classic T-Bird power with some renewed reliability. The seller says it runs and drives great, which is music to any classic car lover's ears. Speaking of reliability, this T-Bird is rolling on tires that were installed in 2019 and they still have excellent tread. That's one less thing to worry about when you're cruising down the boulevard. Now, let's talk numbers. The odometer shows just 32,000 miles. While we can't be sure if that's original or if it's rolled over, it's still a pretty low number for a car of this age. And with only 3 owners in its lifetime, you know this bird has been loved. The seller lists this T-Bird in excellent condition, and from the description, it's hard to argue. A recent paint job, rebuilt drivetrain, new tires. It sounds like this car has had some serious care and attention lavished on it. At $12,500, this 65 Thunderbird seems like a pretty sweet deal. You're getting a classic piece of American automotive history that's been well maintained and updated where it counts. It's ready to hit the road and turn heads wherever it goes. Imagine yourself behind the wheel of this lime green beauty, cruising down the highway, that 390 V8 purring under the hood. It's not just a car. It's a time machine that'll take you back to the golden age of American automobiles. Whether you're a die-hard Ford fan or just someone who appreciates classic style and power, this 65 T-Bird could be the ride you've been dreaming of. It's a chance to own a piece of automotive history that you can actually drive and enjoy. Now that's what I call living the classic car dream. Mark 5. We're checking out a 1977 Ford Thunderbird that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist in Tucson for $12,500. Now, I've got to tell you, this big bird from the 70s is looking pretty sweet. First off, let's talk about the condition. The seller lists it as good, and from the description it sounds like they're not exaggerating. They're saying it's in great shape for its age, which is pretty impressive for a car that's pushing 50 years old. The body is described as nice and straight, which is always a plus with these older cars. Under the hood, we've got a 351 cubic inch V8 engine. These motors were known for their smooth power delivery, perfect for cruising in style. It's paired with an automatic transmission, making this T-Bird a comfortable cruiser. The seller says it runs like a champ, which is music to any classic car lover's ears. Now here's something that really caught my eye. The AC blows cold. Anyone who's dealt with classic cars knows that a working AC system is like finding a unicorn, especially in a place like Tucson. That's a huge plus in my book. The interior is reportedly in great shape, which is another big win. These 70s interiors can often be a weak point in older cars, so it's great to hear that this one's held up well. You've also got power brakes, power steering, and disc brakes, all of which make this classic much easier to drive in modern traffic. The odometer shows 82,000 miles, which isn't too bad for a car of this vintage. Of course, as with any older car, it's always good to verify the mileage if possible. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the price. At $12,500, it's not cheap for a 77 T-Bird. However, if the condition is as good as described, with a strong running engine, cold AC, and a well-preserved interior, it could be worth it for the right buyer. These big 70s luxury cars are starting to gain more appreciation in the classic car world. Imagine cruising down the street in this land yacht, AC blasting, turning heads with its unmistakable 70s style. It's not just a car, it's a time machine on wheels. Whether you're a die-hard Ford fan or just someone who appreciates the unique style of 70s American luxury cars, this 77 Thunderbird could be a fantastic addition to your garage. Just remember, as with any classic car purchase, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection before making a decision. But if everything checks out, this could be your ticket to some seriously stylish classic car cruising. 6. We're checking out a real gem, a 1979 Chevrolet El Camino that's up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average El Camino. This baby's got some serious upgrades that make it stand out from the crowd. First off, let's talk about that engine. This El Camino is rocking a new 350 cubic inch V8 that was professionally installed at 85,000 miles. That's a huge plus in my book. You're getting classic style with some fresh power under the hood. The seller says it runs great, and I believe it. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The odometer shows 111,358 miles, but the seller admits it's rolled over. That means this El Camino has seen some serious road time, but don't let that scare you off. Remember, it's got that new engine, which is a game changer. The seller's been using this as a daily driver, which tells me it's reliable, not just a pretty face sitting in the garage. They claim it rides like a Cadillac and corners like a Corvette, which is a bold statement for an El Camino. If true, that's a sweet combination of comfort and handling. Condition-wise, the seller lists it as excellent, which is impressive for a 40-plus-year-old vehicle. The paint color is listed as silver, which is a classic look for these El Caminos. At $9,500, it's not the cheapest El Camino out there, but considering the new engine and its apparent good condition, it could be a solid deal for the right buyer. It's a turnkey classic that you can drive and enjoy right away. Imagine cruising down the street in this silver beauty, enjoying that smooth Cadillac-like ride, then taking a corner with Corvette-like precision. It's the best of both worlds, classic style with some modern reliability thrown in. Now I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. But if everything checks out, this '79 El Camino could be a fantastic addition to any classic car collection or a great daily driver for someone who wants to stand out from the crowd. Remember, the seller's only accepting cash and no trades. They've already got a new truck, so this El Camino needs a new home. If you've been dreaming of owning a piece of Chevy history that you can actually drive and enjoy every day, this might just be your chance. 7. We're taking a look at a real blast from the past, a 1974 Buick Regal that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $2,000. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks. This isn't a showroom-ready beauty, but it's got potential for days. Let's start with the basics. This green machine is packing a V8 under the hood, paired with an automatic transmission. Classic 70s American muscle car setup right there. The odometer shows 60,000 miles, but as always with older cars, take that with a grain of salt. Now, the seller is honest about the condition, listing it as fair to fair good. That's refreshing to see, and it gives us a realistic expectation. This Regal isn't perfect, but it's not a total basket case either. Here's where it gets interesting. The owner has done some recent work that could save you some headaches down the road. We're talking a new radiator, fresh tune-up and oil change, and new shocks. That's a good start for anyone looking to get this classic back on the road reliably. The tires are reported to be in good condition, which is always a plus. And the seller mentions some new parts are included. That could be a goldmine for the right buyer looking to do some restoration work. At $2,000, this Regal is priced in the budget-friendly range for classic cars. It could be a great project for someone looking to dip their toes into the classic car world without breaking the bank. Or, with a little TLC, it could be a fun weekend cruiser. Now, I've got to mention, the seller requires half the listing price in cash for a test drive. That's an unusual request, so make sure you're comfortable with that before heading out to see the car. Imagine cruising down the street in this green '74 Regal, turning heads and reliving the glory days of American automotive design. It's not perfect, but it's got character, and sometimes that's what classic car ownership is all about. Remember, this is a project car, not a turnkey classic. But for the right person with some mechanical skills and a vision, this Buick Regal could be transformed into a real stunner. It's a chance to own a piece of automotive history without breaking the bank. Just be prepared to put in some work to bring this old girl back to her former glory. 8. We're diving into a real gem from the '70s, a 1974 Plymouth Valiant that's up for grabs on Craigslist for just $4,900. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average Valiant. This baby's got some serious potential. First off, let's talk about that mileage. This green machine has only 41,190 miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car pushing 50 years old. Under the hood, we've got a 318 Ci V8 that the seller says hums, music to any classic car lover's ears. It's paired with an automatic transmission, making it a breeze to cruise around town. The seller lists this Valiant in excellent condition, and they've got some solid points to back that up. The interior is described as immaculate with 100% original upholstery, no tears or holes. That's pretty rare for a car of this vintage. Now here's where it gets even better. The front suspension has been recently rebuilt from the frame up. We're talking new shocks, strut rods, tie rod ends, ball joints, bushings, the works. That's a huge plus for drivability and safety. But let's be real, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. The seller's honest about the car's flaws, which I appreciate. The passenger rear quarter panel has significant damage. The AC doesn't blow cold, might just need a recharge. And there's some minor rust on the body and in the trunk. The original trunk liner is also brittle and crumbling. However, don't let these issues scare you off. The seller's including some replacement parts, like taillight assemblies and a fender cap. Plus, you're getting 2 sets of 1974 Plymouth hubcaps. Talk about options. At $4,900, this Valiant could be a steal for the right buyer. It's a solid platform for a full restoration or a hot rodding project. Imagine cruising down the street in this low-mileage classic, turning heads with its 70s style. Remember, this isn't a perfect car. It needs some TLC. But with its low mileage, recent suspension work, and overall good condition, it's a fantastic starting point for someone looking to get into the classic car scene without breaking the bank. So, if you've been dreaming of owning a piece of Mopar history, this '74 Valiant could be your ticket. It's not just a car, it's a time machine on wheels, ready to take you back to the golden age of American automobiles. Just be prepared to put in some work to bring this old girl back to her former glory. But hey, that's half the fun of classic car ownership, right? 9. We're diving into a real piece of automotive history, a 1960 Lincoln Premier that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $7,500. Now, let me tell you, this isn't just any old Lincoln. This is a rare bird, one of only 1,364 two-door hardtops made that year. First off, let's talk about the sheer presence of this car. We're looking at 229 inches of pure, unadulterated American luxury. This beast is longer than some modern-day pickup trucks. It's got those iconic canted headlights and Dagmars that just scream late 50s, early 60s style. Now, I've got to be straight with you. This Lincoln needs some serious TLC. The seller's honest about its condition, which I appreciate. The original 430 MEL engine is still there, but it needs a rebuild. The body's reportedly in great condition, which is a huge plus for a 60-year-old car, but it needs a repaint. It was originally copper poly but is now black. Here's where it gets interesting. This Lincoln has a Hollywood pedigree. It was actually used in the movie Waiting for the Light with Shirley MacLaine and Terry Garr. That's a cool bit of history that could make this car even more special to the right buyer. The interior needs a full redo, which could be seen as a blank canvas for someone looking to customize. The odometer's broken and has rolled over, so the true mileage is unknown. At $7,500, this Lincoln isn't cheap, but it's not outrageous either for such a rare classic. It's definitely a project car. You're not going to be cruising down the boulevard this weekend. But for someone with the time, skills, and vision, this could be transformed into something truly spectacular. Imagine the possibilities. You could restore it to its original glory, create a custom masterpiece, or even lean into its movie history for a unique theme. The seller even suggests turning it into a rat rod or lowrider. Talk about a conversation starter. Now, I've got to be clear, this is not a car for the faint of heart. It needs a full restoration, which means you're looking at a significant investment of time and money beyond the purchase price. But if you're up for the challenge, this 1960 Lincoln Premier could be an incredible addition to any classic car collection. Remember, they're not making any more of these. It's a chance to own a piece of automotive history, a canvas for your creativity, and a potential showstopper once restored. Just be prepared for a long-term project and some serious wrenching. But hey, isn't that half the fun of classic car ownership? 10. We're diving into a real hidden gem, a 1963 Dodge 8080 custom sedan that's up for grabs on Craigslist for just $3,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your run-of-the-mill classic. This is a piece of automotive history that you don't see every day. First off, let's talk about rarity. The Dodge 880 was only produced for a few years, and this 63 model is a true survivor. The seller claims it's 100% original, which is incredible for a car pushing 60 years old. Even better, it's been in Pasco its whole life, bought new right there in town. That's the kind of provenance that classic car collectors dream about. Under the hood, we've got a 383 V8, a robust engine known for its reliability and power. It's paired with a push-button automatic transmission, which is just cool as heck. Power steering and power brakes are also on board, making this big old sedan easier to maneuver than you might think. Now I've got to be straight with you. This Dodge needs some work. The seller's honest about it needing some TLC before it'll be road ready. They've had it running with some fresh gas down the carb and say the motor sounds good, which is promising. But you'll need to put in some elbow grease to get this beauty cruising again. The body, however, sounds like it's in great shape. The seller describes it as super solid and rust-free, which is huge for a car of this vintage. All that chrome and stainless trim is still there too, just waiting to be polished up to its former glory. It's only missing one hubcap. Not bad for a 60-year-old car. At $3,000, this Dodge 880 could be a steal for the right buyer. Sure, it needs work, but you're getting a rare original classic with a clean title and keys. Imagine cruising down the street in this white beauty, turning heads with its unique styling and push-button transmission. Now, I've got to remind you, this is a project car. It's not going to be ready for a car show next weekend. But for someone with some mechanical skills and a passion for preserving automotive history, this 1963 Dodge 1880 could be an incredibly rewarding project. Remember, they're not making any more of these. It's a chance to own a piece of Dodge history, a canvas for restoration, and a potential showstopper once it's back on the road. Just be prepared for some serious wrenching and a bit of a treasure hunt for any hard-to-find parts. But hey, that's part of the fun of owning a rare classic like this, right? 11. We're diving into a real gem, a 1963 Dodge Dart GT convertible that's up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,500. Now, let me tell you, this isn't your average Dart. This baby's got some serious upgrades that make it stand out from the crowd. First off, let's talk about that engine. This Dart's been given a 318 conversion with a mild cam, which is a sweet upgrade from the original power plant. It's breathing through a Holly carb sitting on an Edelbrock intake, and it's got dual exhaust to let that V8 sing. The seller reports 55 psi oil pressure and a steady 190 on the temp gauge. That's the kind of numbers you want to see in a classic cruiser. The drivetrain's been beefed up too, with a 727 transmission handling the power. And get this, it's got electronic ignition, which should make for easier starts and better reliability. That's a nice modern touch on a classic ride. Now, let's talk about condition. The seller lists it as good, and they've done some serious work to back that up. We're talking freshly chromed bumpers, a new windshield, new alternator, and a complete brake rebuild including a new booster. The body's described as straight with no rust, which is huge for a 60-year-old convertible. The interior's gotten some love too, with legendary factory seat covers. And here's a bonus. It comes with a new black vinyl top ready to install. That's a nice touch for the next owner. But let's be real, it's not perfect. The paint is described as fair and could use a polishing. The odometer's broken, so the true mileage is unknown. It shows $54,000, but take that with a grain of salt. At $9,500, this Dart GT convertible isn't cheap, but it's not outrageous either for a classic convertible with some nice upgrades. It sounds like a turnkey cruiser that you could enjoy right away while gradually improving it over time. Imagine cruising down the boulevard in this red beauty, top down, that 318 rumbling through the dual exhaust. It's not just a car. It's a time machine that'll take you back to the golden age of American muscle, with some modern reliability thrown in for good measure. Now, as always with classic cars, it's a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. But if everything checks out, this 63 Dart GT convertible could be a fantastic addition to any Mopar enthusiast's garage. It's a chance to own a piece of Dodge history that you can actually drive and enjoy. And with those upgrades, it sounds like it'll be a blast to drive too. 12. We're taking a look at a real blast from the past, a 1975 Ford Maverick that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $5,900. Now, I've got to tell you, this little coupe has got some interesting features that might just pique your interest. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. This Maverick is packing a 302 V8 engine. That's a nice step up from the smaller engines these cars often came with. It's paired with an automatic transmission, making it a smooth cruiser for sure. Now here's something that caught my eye. The seller says the air conditioning still runs. That's a big deal for a car pushing 50 years old. Imagine cruising down the street in this 70s classic with the AC blasting. That's a comfort you don't often get in cars of this vintage. The seller describes the overall condition as good, and they're backing that up with some solid points. They say there's no rust and no accidents, which is pretty impressive for a car of this age. The interior is described as okay, which is probably fair for a 48-year-old car. But let's be real here, it's not all perfect. The odometer is broken, so the true mileage is unknown. The seller lists 90,000 miles, but take that with a grain of salt. It could be more, it could be less. There's no way to know for sure. At $5,900, this Maverick isn't the cheapest out there. But it's not outrageous either, especially if it's as rust-free and accident-free as the seller claims. The V8 engine and working AC are definitely points in its favor. Imagine cruising down the street in this piece of 70s Americana, turning heads with its classic lines and rumbling V8. It's not just a car, it's a time machine on wheels. Now I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection before making a decision. The description is pretty brief, so there might be some surprises, good or bad, that aren't mentioned. But if everything checks out, this '75 Maverick could be a fun addition to any classic car collection. It's a chance to own a piece of Ford history that you can actually drive and enjoy. Just be prepared for some potential tinkering. That's part of the fun of classic car ownership, right? Remember, they're not making any more of these. If you've been dreaming of owning a classic Ford from the 70s, this Maverick might just be your ticket to ride. Just make sure you're ready for the quirks and charms that come with a car from this era. 13. We're diving into a real gem from the 70s, a 1976 Ford LTD that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $7,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average LTD. This baby's got some features that make it stand out from the crowd. First off, let's talk about that mileage. This LTD is showing just 48,989 original miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car pushing 50 years old. It's like finding a time capsule on wheels. Under the hood, we've got a 351 motor, which was a solid, reliable engine for these big Fords. Now, here's something interesting. The seller lists this as having a manual transmission. That's pretty rare for an LTD of this vintage, as most came with automatics. If it's truly a manual, that could make this a unique find for collectors. The seller describes the condition as excellent, which is impressive for a car of this age. They say it's been kept clean and works great, which is music to any classic car lover's ears. However, they also mention it hasn't been used recently and has been kept in storage. That could be a double-edged sword. It might have preserved the car well, but it could also mean some components might need attention after sitting for a while. Now let's be real, it's not all perfect. The AC doesn't work too well, but the seller thinks it just needs a Freon recharge. That's a common issue with older cars, and hopefully it's an easy fix. At $7,500 or best offer, this LTD is priced in the mid-range for classic cars of this era. If the condition is as good as described and that mileage is accurate, it could be a solid deal for the right buyer. Imagine cruising down the street in this 70s land yacht, turning heads with its classic lines and rumbling 351. It's not just a car, it's a time machine that'll take you back to the days of disco and bell-bottoms. Now I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. Pay special attention to how it runs after sitting in storage, and check for any issues that might have developed while it was sitting. But if everything checks out, this 76 LTD could be a fantastic addition to any classic car collection. It's a chance to own a piece of Ford history that you can actually drive and enjoy. Just be prepared for some potential tinkering. That's part of the fun of classic car ownership, right? Remember, they're not making any more of these. If you've been dreaming of owning a classic full-size Ford from the 70s, this low-mileage LTD in plain view, TX might just be your ticket to ride. Just make sure you're ready for the quirks and charms that come with a car from this era. 14. We're diving into a real interesting piece of 70s muscle, a 1974 Plymouth Scamp that's up for grabs on Craigslist for $6,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average Scamp. This baby's got some surprises under the hood. First off, let's talk about that engine. This Scamp's packing a 360 small block V8. That's a serious upgrade from the smaller engines these cars typically came with. The seller says it starts right up and runs great, which is always music to a gearhead's ears. Now here's where it gets interesting. The odometer shows 30,000 miles, but the seller admits it's broken. So, the true mileage is anyone's guess. It could be 130,000, it could be 230,000. There's no way to know for sure. But hey, it's the miles of smiles that count, right? The seller describes the condition as good and mentions many upgrades and new parts, which is promising. They've also just paid the registration, so that's one less hassle for the new owner. But let's be real, there are some red flags here. The title is listed as salvage, which means this Scamp has been through some stuff. It's definitely something to consider and investigate further before making a purchase. On the plus side, the deal includes a full parts car. That's a huge bonus for anyone looking to restore this Scamp or keep it running long term. It's like getting a treasure trove of spare parts thrown in. At $6,500, this Scamp isn't cheap, especially considering the salvage title. But if those upgrades are solid and that 360 runs as well as the seller claims, it could still be a fun project for the right buyer. Imagine cruising down the street in this black beauty, that 360 small block rumbling under the hood. It's not just a car, it's a time machine that'll take you back to the golden age of American muscle. Now, I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, especially one with a salvage title, it's crucial to see it in person and get a professional inspection before making a decision. You'll want to know exactly what you're getting into. But if everything checks out, this '74 Scamp could be a fun addition to any Mopar enthusiast's garage. It's a chance to own a piece of Plymouth history with some serious muscle under the hood. Just be prepared for some potential challenges along the way. That's part of the adventure of owning a classic like this. Remember, they're not making any more of these. If you've been dreaming of a compact Mopar with big power, this Scamp might just be your ticket to tire-smoking fun. Just make sure you go in with eyes wide open and a willingness to wrench. 15. We're diving into a real piece of automotive history, a 1959 Ford Edsel that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $7,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't just any old car. This is a bona fide conversation starter on wheels. First off, let's address the elephant in the room. The Edsel is infamous in automotive history, known for being one of Ford's biggest flops. But that's exactly what makes it so intriguing to collectors today. This 1959 model represents the second and final full year of Edsel production, making it a rare find indeed. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The seller claims this Edsel has only 800 kilometers on the odometer. That's less than 500 miles. If that's accurate, and remember, always verify these things in person, we're talking about an incredibly low mileage example of an already rare car. The seller says it was well kept in good shape, which is promising for a 60-plus-year-old vehicle. The good news continues with the seller stating there are no running issues. They mention it only needs a new battery and gas to get going. That's pretty encouraging for a car of this vintage, but as always, take it with a grain of salt until you can verify it yourself. At $7,000, this Edsel isn't cheap, but it's not outrageous either for such a unique piece of automotive history, especially if that mileage claim is accurate. However, the listing is pretty sparse on details. We don't know about the body condition, the interior state, or even which model of Edsel this is. They made several in '59. Imagine cruising down the street in this piece of '50s Americana, turning heads with its distinctive, some might say notorious, styling. It's not just a car, it's a rolling history lesson and a guaranteed conversation starter at any car show. Now, I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, especially one this old, it's crucial to see it in person and get a professional inspection before making a decision. You'll want to verify that mileage claim and check for any hidden issues that might not be apparent at first glance. But if everything checks out, this '59 Edsel could be a fantastic addition to any classic car collection. It's a chance to own a piece of Ford history that's as infamous as it is rare. Just be prepared for some potential challenges along the way. Parts for Edsels aren't exactly common, so ownership might require some creative problem solving. 16. We're diving into a real gem from the early 70s, a 1971 Ford Torino that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $5,900. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average Torino. This baby's got some charm that might just make you fall in love. First off, let's talk about the looks. This Torino is a two-door hardtop with a vinyl top, and the seller says it's very clean for its age. It's sporting a red paint job, which is always a head-turner on classic muscle cars. The seller mentions it's had an older restoration job, but the important thing is no rust. That's huge for a car pushing 50 years old. Under the hood, we've got a 302 V8 engine. It's not the biggest motor Ford put in these, but it's a reliable power plant that should give you plenty of oomph for cruising. The seller says it runs and drives fine, which is always good to hear. However, they're honest about it recently starting to backfire. That could be something simple like a timing issue, or it might need a bit more attention. Definitely something to check out. Now, let's talk mileage. The odometer shows 77,194 miles, which isn't bad at all for a car of this vintage. Of course, with classics, you always have to take mileage with a grain of salt, but if it's accurate, that's pretty low for a 50-year-old car. The interior sounds mostly good, with one caveat: the front driver's seat has some splits in the seam. That's pretty common for cars of this age, and it's something that could be fixed without too much trouble. The rest of the interior is described as fine, which is encouraging. At $5,900, this Torino is priced pretty reasonably for a classic in good condition. It's not perfect. That backfiring issue and the seat seam are things to consider. But it sounds like a solid driver that you could enjoy right away while gradually improving it over time. Imagine cruising down the boulevard in this red beauty, turning heads with its classic lines and rumbling V8. It's not just a car, it's a time machine that'll take you back to the early 70s, when muscle cars ruled the streets. Now I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person, and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. Pay special attention to that backfiring issue and check for any other potential problems that might not be apparent at first glance. 17. We're diving into a real gem from the 80s, a 1985 Cadillac Eldorado that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,500. Now, let me tell you, this isn't your average Eldorado. This baby's got some features that make it stand out from the crowd. First off, let's talk about that mileage. This Eldorado is showing just 28,600 miles on the odometer. That's incredibly low for a car pushing 40 years old. It's like finding a time capsule on wheels. The seller describes it as beautiful and rare, which certainly fits with that low mileage. This white beauty is packing a V8 under the hood, paired with an automatic transmission. Classic Cadillac luxury all the way. It's a rear-wheel drive model, which is interesting because most Eldorados of this era were front-wheel drive. That could make this an even rarer find if accurate. The seller lists the condition as excellent, which is impressive for a car of this age. If it's as good as described, you could be looking at a nearly showroom-quality example of 80s luxury. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The seller is firm on the $8,500 asking price, but they're willing to trade for a 4R4 pickup of similar value, preferably from the 90s. That's an intriguing option for anyone looking to swap their truck for a classic luxury ride. At $8,500, this Eldorado isn't cheap, but it's not outrageous either for a low-mileage, excellent-condition classic luxury car. If the condition is as good as described and that mileage is accurate, it could be a solid deal for the right buyer. Imagine cruising down the boulevard in this white beauty, floating on that classic Cadillac suspension, surrounded by 80s luxury. It's not just a car, it's a time machine that'll take you back to the days of big hair and bigger shoulder pads. Now, I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. Pay special attention to the electrical systems and any potential issues that might have developed from sitting if it wasn't driven regularly. But if everything checks out, this '85 Eldorado could be a fantastic addition to any classic car collection. It's a chance to own a piece of Cadillac history that you can actually drive and enjoy. Just be prepared for some potential quirks. That's part of the charm of owning a classic luxury car, right? 18. We're diving into a real gem from the 80s, a 1980 Chevy El Camino that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $6,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average El Camino. This baby's got some serious charm and upgrades that make it stand out from the crowd. First off, let's talk about that engine. This El Camino is packing a small block Chevy SBC V8 under the hood, paired with a new 350 turbo transmission. That's a solid, reliable powertrain combo that should give you plenty of grunt for cruising or hauling. The seller mentions it's their everyday driver, which is a great sign. It means this classic is reliable enough for regular use. Now here's where it gets interesting. The odometer shows 70,000 miles, but the seller admits it's rolled over. So the true mileage is anyone's guess. It could be 170,000, it could be more. There's no way to know for sure. But hey, it's the miles of smiles that count, right? The seller describes the condition as good, and they're backing that up with some solid points. They say there's no rust, which is huge for a 40-year-old vehicle. It's got power brakes, power steering, and disc brakes. All nice features that make it more drivable in modern traffic. Plus, it's got working air conditioning, which is like finding a unicorn in a classic car. The interior is described as clean, and it's rolling on nice tires and wheels. And let's not forget that orange paint job. That's sure to turn some heads at your local car meet. At $6,500, this El Camino is priced pretty reasonably for a classic in good condition, especially one that's been well maintained and upgraded. It sounds like a solid driver that you could enjoy right away while gradually improving it over time. Imagine cruising down the street in this orange beauty, that small block V8 rumbling under the hood. It's not just a car, it's a time machine that'll take you back to the 80s, when business in the front, party in the back wasn't just a hairstyle, it was a car design. Now, I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person, and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. Pay special attention to how it runs and drives, and check for any issues that might not be apparent at first glance. 19. We're diving into a real gem from the 80s, a 1984 Oldsmobile Toronado that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average Olds. This baby's got some features that make it stand out from the crowd. First off, let's talk about that mileage. The seller lists it at 47,500 miles, which is incredibly low for a car pushing 40 years old. It's like finding a time capsule on wheels. However, I've got to point out that the listing also shows 42,417 miles in the details. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there. It's always a good idea to verify the actual mileage in person. This Toronado is packing a V8 under the hood, paired with an automatic transmission. Classic 80s luxury all the way. The Toronado is known for its front-wheel drive layout, which was pretty innovative for a full-size American car of its time. The seller describes the condition as good and mentions that it's all original. That's pretty impressive for a car of this vintage. They say it's in good shape, which is encouraging, but also note that it's ready for your touch on her. This suggests that while it's in good condition, there might be some room for improvements or personalization. At $9,000, this Toronado isn't cheap, but it's not outrageous either for a low-mileage, good-condition classic luxury car. If the condition is as good as described and that mileage is accurate, it could be a solid deal for the right buyer. Imagine cruising down the boulevard in this 80s beauty, floating on that plush Oldsmobile suspension, surrounded by classic American luxury. It's not just a car, it's a time machine that'll take you back to the days of big hair and even bigger car designs. Now, I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person. and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. Pay special attention to the electrical systems and any potential issues that might have developed from sitting if it wasn't driven regularly. But if everything checks out, this '84 Toronado could be a fantastic addition to any classic car collection. It's a chance to own a piece of Oldsmobile history that you can actually drive and enjoy. Just be prepared for some potential quirks. That's part of the charm of owning a classic luxury car, right? 20. We're diving into a real hidden gem. A 1965 Rambler Marlin that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $14,500. Now, let me tell you, this isn't your average classic. This baby's got some serious style and upgrades that make it a true head-turner. First off, let's talk about what makes the Marlin special. This was AMC's answer to the fastback craze of the mid-60s, and it's a design that still turns heads today. With its long, sleek roofline and unique styling, it's a car that stands out in a sea of Mustangs and Camaros. Under the hood, we've got a 327 Rambler V8 engine. That's a robust power plant that should give this Marlin plenty of get up and go. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's paired with a 3-speed manual transmission with overdrive and a twin-stick setup. That's a rare and cool feature that'll make driving this classic a real experience. The seller lists this Marlin in excellent condition, and they've got some solid points to back that up. We're talking fresh paint in white, which looks stunning on these cars. The interior is new, which is a huge plus for a car of this age. They've also installed an air suspension system, which should give this classic a smooth, modern ride quality. Now, let's talk about those miles. The odometer shows 114,000 miles, which isn't low for a classic, but it's not astronomical either. The important thing is that the seller says it runs and drives great, which is music to any classic car lover's ears. At $14,500, this Marlin isn't cheap, but it's not outrageous either for a well-maintained, upgraded classic in excellent condition. You're getting a rare car that's been thoughtfully improved to make it more enjoyable to drive in the modern era. Imagine cruising down the highway in this white beauty, that 327 V8 purring under the hood, playing with that unique twin-stick transmission. It's not just a car. It's a time machine that'll take you back to the mid-60s, when American car design was at its most daring and innovative. Now, I've got to be straight with you. As with any classic car, it's always a good idea to see it in person and maybe even get a professional inspection before pulling the trigger. Pay special attention to how that air suspension system is working and check for any issues that might not be apparent at first glance.